What if I told you that there once lived a doctor who claimed he could smell death itself? Not the decay that comes after, but the actual approach of death hours, sometimes days before it arrived. His name was Dr. Heinrich Vollmer, and by 1937, he had become both the most sought after and most feared physician in the small Bavarian town of Rothenburg. Patients would beg for his services, not because they trusted his treatments, but because they desperately needed to know when their time would come. But here's what made Dr. Vollmer truly terrifying. He was never wrong. This is not a story you'll find in medical journals or history books. This is the story they tried to bury, along with the doctor himself, in 1943. But the truth has a way of clawing its way back to the surface, doesn't it? The first time Dr. Heinrich Vollmer detected what he called the scent of approaching death, he was just 28 years old, fresh out of medical school in Munich. It was winter of 1922, and he had just taken over his late father's practice in Rothenburg. The patient was an elderly baker named Klaus Weber, who had come in complaining of chest pains. As Vollmer examined him, he was suddenly overwhelmed by what he would later describe as the smell of wilted flowers mixed with copper pennies and something else. Something ancient and final. The scent was so distinct, so overpowering, that Vollmer actually stepped back from his patient. Weber died that very night in his sleep. At first, Vollmer dismissed it as coincidence. Perhaps the man had been sicker than he appeared. Perhaps the smell was just poor hygiene or some undiagnosed infection. But then it happened again. 3 weeks later, a young mother brought her infant son for a routine checkup. The moment Vollmer entered the examination room, that same sickly sweet copper scent filled his nostrils. This time, it was fainter, more delicate, like death was still deciding whether to claim its prize. He examined the baby thoroughly, finding nothing wrong. The child seemed healthy, alert, responsive, but the smell was there, unmistakable, and growing stronger by the minute. Vollmer found himself in an impossible position. How do you tell a mother that her perfectly healthy child is going to die? How do you explain that you can smell death approaching, like others might smell fresh bread or blooming roses? He said nothing. The child died 2 days later from what the death certificate would list as sudden infant death syndrome. But Vollmer knew better. He had smelled it coming. Word began to spread through Rothenburg that Dr. Vollmer had an unusual gift. Patients started coming to him, not for treatment, but for predictions. They wanted to know if they were dying, and more importantly, when. First, Vollmer refused to discuss his ability. He was a man of science, trained in anatomy and medicine, not mysticism or fortune-telling, but the scent kept coming, stronger with each patient who was approaching death. By 1925, Vollmer had documented over 200 cases where he detected the death scent. In every single instance, the patient died within 72 hours. He began keeping detailed notes, trying to understand the phenomenon from a scientific perspective. The scent, he wrote, varied in intensity, based on how close death was. A faint whisper might mean the person had weeks left. A strong, overwhelming odor meant hours. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Vollmer discovered that the scent wasn't just about natural death. It appeared before suicides, accidents, even murders. In March of 1926, he detected the scent on Hans Müller, a perfectly healthy 30-year-old blacksmith. Vollmer was so disturbed by the intensity of the smell that he actually followed Müller home, watching from a distance. 3 hours later, Müller was trampled by a spooked horse and died instantly. The townspeople of Rothenburg began to view Vollmer with a mixture of reverence and terror. Some called him a prophet, others whispered that he was in league with dark forces. Parents would bring their children to him for checkups, then wait with bated breath to see if he detected anything unusual. If he seemed relaxed during the examination, they would leave with relief. But if they saw him suddenly step back, or noticed his nostrils flare slightly, they knew their worst fears were about to be realized. Vollmer tried to use his ability to save lives. If he detected the scent on someone who appeared healthy, he would insist on more thorough examinations, additional tests, preventive treatments. But death, it seemed, was not so easily cheated. Patients he warned about heart problems would die in car accidents. Those he treated for potential strokes would succumb to sudden aneurysms. It was as if death itself was adapting, finding new ways to claim those it had already marked. The psychological toll on Valmore was immense. Imagine being unable to interact with another human being without potentially smelling their impending doom. He began to isolate himself, seeing fewer patients, avoiding social gatherings. His wife Maria later told neighbors that he would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, claiming he could smell death in the air, searching the house to see if the scent was coming from her or their 2 young children. In 1932, something changed. Vollmer began detecting the scent more frequently, on more people. Where once he might encounter 1 or 2 dying patients per month, now he was detecting the death scent daily, sometimes on multiple people. The smell was becoming more complex too, layered with what he described as industrial chemicals and burning metal. He became convinced that something terrible was approaching, something that would claim many lives at once. His predictions proved horrifyingly accurate. By 1938, with the rise of the Nazi regime, death was indeed approaching Rothenburg in unprecedented numbers. Jewish residents began disappearing. Political dissidents vanished in the night, and Vollmer could smell it all before it happened. The scent of approaching death now followed him everywhere, so constant and overwhelming that he could barely function. Here's where the official records become murky, but local testimonies paint a disturbing picture. Witnesses claimed that Vollmer would appear at people's homes hours before SS officers arrived to arrest them. He would stand across the street, just watching, his face pale and drawn. Some families interpreted his presence as a warning and managed to escape. Others saw him as a harbinger of doom, believing his very presence was somehow causing their fate. In 1941, Maria Vollmer was found dead in their home, apparently from a heart attack. But neighbors reported seeing Heinrich standing in their garden for hours before her body was discovered, just staring at the house with an expression of profound grief. When questioned by local authorities, he simply said he had smelled it coming. For weeks, by this time, Vollmer had become a ghost of his former self. Townspeople reported that he looked decades older than his 47 years. His hair had gone completely white, his eyes were sunken and hollow, and he spoke in whispers. When he spoke at all, most disturbing of all, people claimed that being near Vollmer had begun to make them feel uneasy, as if his ability to detect death was somehow contagious. The end came in 1943. Vollmer had been documenting his experiences in a series of journals, detailed accounts of every death he had predicted, every scent he had detected. On March 15th, he made his final entry. "The scent is here now, in my own home, stronger than I have ever experienced it. It smells like iron and earth and the end of everything. I understand now that I was never meant to prevent death, only to witness its approach. Tonight, I smell it coming for me." Heinrich Vollmer was found dead in his study the next morning, slumped over his desk where he had been writing. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but there were no signs of illness or struggle. His journals were confiscated by German authorities and disappeared entirely. Local records of his unusual ability were destroyed or removed from medical files. It was as if someone wanted to erase all evidence that Dr. Heinrich Vollmer and his terrible gift had ever existed. But stories have a way of surviving, don't they? Passed down through generations, whispered in dark corners, remembered by those who witnessed something that defied explanation. Some of Vollmer's former patients, now elderly, still tell their grandchildren about the doctor who could smell death approaching. They speak of how he would enter a room and immediately know who among them wouldn't see another sunrise. Modern medical science has no explanation for Vollmer's alleged ability. Some researchers have theorized that certain individuals might be hypersensitive to chemical changes that occur in the human body before death, pheromones or metabolic shifts that most people cannot detect. Others suggest it was merely an extremely developed intuition, a doctor's ability to read subtle signs of illness that escaped conscious recognition. But here's what's truly disturbing about the Vollmer case. In 1997, Construction workers renovating the basement of the old Rothenburg Hospital made a discovery that authorities tried to keep quiet. Hidden beneath the foundation, they found a collection of glass vials, each one labeled with a date and a name. Chemical analysis revealed that the vials contained various organic compounds, including several that are only produced by the human body under extreme stress or during the dying process. The labels on the vials matched the names and death dates of 43 people who had been patients of Dr. Heinrich Völlmer. Somehow, he had not just predicted their deaths, he had collected physical evidence of what he claimed to smell. The vials were quietly removed and their contents destroyed, but not before several local officials reported experiencing strange sensations while examining them, overwhelming feelings of dread and an unusual metallic taste in their mouths. Was Heinrich Völlmer a gifted physician with an extraordinary sensory ability? Or was he something else entirely? Was he truly detecting the approach of death? Or was he somehow connected to it in ways that modern science cannot explain? The truth died with him in 1943, taking its secrets to a grave that, according to local cemetery records, was moved 3 times before authorities finally settled on an unmarked plot in the far corner of the Rothenburg Cemetery. They say that even now, more than 80 years later, visitors to that cemetery sometimes report catching a faint scent while walking past that unmarked grave. They describe it as the smell of wilted flowers mixed with copper pennies and something else, something ancient and final, something that makes them quicken their pace and glance nervously over their shoulders, as if death itself might be following close behind. The story of Dr. Heinrich Völlmer reminds us that there are aspects of human experience that remain beyond our understanding, phenomena that exist in the shadowy spaces between science and superstition. Whether his ability was real or imagined, whether he was blessed with an extraordinary gift or cursed with an unspeakable burden, one thing remains clear. In the small town of Rothenburg, between 1922 and 1943, there lived a man who claimed he could smell death approaching, and no one who encountered him ever forgot the experience. Perhaps that's the most unsettling part of this story. Not that such an ability might exist, but that if it does, there might be others out there right now, walking among us, detecting the scent of our final moments while we remain blissfully unaware. The next time you visit a doctor or encounter someone who seems to know more about your future than they should, pay attention to their reaction when they first meet you. Do they step back unexpectedly? Do their nostrils flare slightly? Do they look at you with an expression of profound sadness, as if they can see something approaching that you cannot? Because if Dr. Heinrich Völlmer's story teaches us anything, it's that death has its own scent, and somewhere in this world, there might still be those who can smell it coming. Sweet dreams.